might have thought this was just a meme, but no, I'm actually going to try and write every PewDiePie oopsie I can think of on Notepad. Hope that sounds good. Let's get started. Alright, the first one that started it all off, the Wall Street Journal, give poor Indian boys money to say death to all Jews. I'm not going to editorialize too much as I write the list. We can come to what all this means a little bit later on. Alright, so next was the gamer moment, the PUBG bridge. I'm sure we all know, hard R. Alright, what was after that? I think there was the ER shout out when he shouted out a bunch of channels, and one of them was a straight up Nazi. And I'm not really going to debate whether or not ER was a Nazi, because I think it was pretty clear if you have anything more than a single digit IQ. And I think I've given evidence about this in previous videos. Okay, he had far right commentator Ben Shapiro on his channel and portrayed him in a positive light, let's say. I think that's fair. You might disagree about whether or not this is an oopsie per se. I mean, I'd say it was, considering some of the views Ben has publicly put out there to the world and the sort of actions that some of his followers have taken. There seems to be a bit of a radicalizing factor about Ben. So I think exposing him to a bunch of impressionable young fans is a bit of an oopsie. Okay, now this is a biggie. He used to follow a bunch of legitimate white nationalists like Stefan Molyneux, Lauren Southern, who again, like Ben, she is someone who has been linked to quite a lot of white supremacist activism, let's say. I mean, she seems to have been a pretty persuasive figure in the actions of the New Zealand shooter. I think one of the conspiracy theories that she put out there was literally the name of the guy's manifesto. So what I thought was odd was after the New Zealand attack, he actually unfollowed everyone, like literally every single one of his people that he was following. And he didn't mention why he did it and anything like that. I thought that was a bit odd, but yeah. And, you know, if you want to say that following someone isn't like a direct endorsement of them or something, I agree. But this particularly is like a fairly niche and extreme sort of ideology. So, and when there's so many of them from that fairly niche ideology that you follow, it does bring up some alarm bells. So I'd say it's a bit of an oopsie. Or certainly it was kind of fucking weird. There was something that happened all before this. Oh yeah, he made like a pretty weird video about climate change. I think the video was called It's All Over, and you can watch it, but it's a pretty painful watch. In the video, he basically claims that celebrities like Jennifer Lawrence and I think Sarah Silverman maybe, he basically strawmans them into this position where it seems like they're claiming that Trump is directly responsible for wildfires and hurricanes that are currently happening in California or whatever, while weirdly ignoring the actual message they were obviously trying to convey, which was that climate change is a serious threat that will exacerbate the regularity at which these disasters occur, like hurricanes and stuff like that, and that we should probably advocate for politicians, representatives that take the threat seriously, rather than someone like Trump who clearly doesn't. He doesn't even believe in the thing. And he turns that message somehow into, oh, all these celebrities are just doing it for clout, whining about climate change and Trump. There was like a weird sense of downplaying the impacts of climate change or how important it is to advocate for politicians and policies that aim to improve it for the future, you know? You know, the video is literally titled It's All Over, which is, I assume, sarcastic, as though people are overreacting to the threat of natural disasters and climate change. I would say leaning into the narrative that plays down the severity of the existential threat that climate change poses to all of us is quite an oopsie. And then there was this recent ADL donation. Basically, he donated some money to the Anti-Defamation League, which I think is like an anti-bigotry organization, Jewish organization. And a bunch of his fans got really mad, like really, really mad. It's tough to tell how much of that is due to them not liking the ADL as an organization, because apparently they have like a shady past, or at least that's what some PewDiePie fans claim. I haven't looked into it too much, and also a lot of it was very personal because the ADL, I think, railed against PewDiePie a little bit during the Wall Street Journal stuff, and so people were still like a little butthurt about that. A lot of the comments on his subreddit were pretty disgusting, like very much conspiratorial, anti-Semitic, Jewish people controlling things, that kind of sentiment was thrown around and getting upvoted. Literally, there's a post with 10,000 upvotes where they question his motivations for the donation, and it literally comes with a screenshot of a Twitter user named Henrik Palmgren, who is a white nationalist. Yeah, his subreddit was an absolute mess that day. I was there looking at it all. It was pretty funny. Like, the mods on there had to delete so much shit and perform a bunch of damage control to, minimize the links between PewDiePie and Nazi shit. It got brigaded by 4chan and Poll as well, I'm pretty sure. A lot of his YouTube comments as well on the video where he announced the donation. And caving into that sort of portion of your fan base I think sends a weird message. They see it as basically a win. Oh, Pewds is still based, So, bit of an oopsie. He did a new documentary style video about hate symbols video. Now, honestly, for the most part, this video was actually okay, and I thought it was fine. It wasn't too much I disagreed with. But there were a couple of things that really stood out to me and that I thought was kind of weird, especially the stuff that I feel like he chose to leave out of the documentary when it comes to talking about dog whistles, with like Pepe and the OK sign or whatever. Overall, the way he presented it, that I think was incomplete and irresponsible. And I'll get more into that in a bit. Actually, let's do it right now. I think he nails down the aspect of, there's a certain group of people that focuses a little bit too much on dog whistles and hate symbols and stuff. Like, oh, they're using the green frog pee-pee, they must be racist. Like, that is definitely a sentiment that exists that I disagree with, especially from people that are out of touch, like some boomers in the mainstream media, or from people who want to demonize or simplify these things way too much, or virtue signal about how woke they are, and feign outrage for those internet points. So he showed some prominent examples of this happening. Actually, before we get into PewDiePie's video, I'll just give you a quick summary of my basic ideas and thoughts about these dog whistles or symbols or whatever. Then you can understand where I'm coming from before I break down my issues with what PewDiePie said or did, or what he excluded from the video. So I'm not going to deem that every time someone does this, it's because they're signaling their white supremacy or that they're dog whistling something, right? So for example, if I go scuba diving and I do this to whoever I'm with before I jump into the water, clearly I'm not really saying anything other than, hey, I'm good to go. I think most reasonable people understand that you need to consider the context in which some of these symbols are used. But if someone tweets out something like, #build that wall so we can stop the globalists from forcing migration down our throats, with an OK sign, then that's something to consider. Yeah, it's just another sign that alarm bells should be going off in your head, that, oh, this person might be a little bit more far off than you had initially thought, or indeed much more far off to the extreme than your average conservative. It's just a bit of a marker, and there's nothing wrong with recognizing that. Because what these people want is plausible deniability. And they hate clarity, or that people might start catching on. They want to muddy the situation, which is why they adopt such seemingly innocuous signs and symbols. And also using symbols like the OK sign or Pepe's or whatever makes you seem a lot more approachable than if you go around hiding. People who might eventually come down your path of being a Nazi will be less suspicious in those initial stages if these are the signals you're giving off. You gotta let them get their foot in the door first before you really red pill them, So yeah, I think it's good to recognize and be cognizant of the fact that these symbols can be used in malicious ways. Now, that does come at the expense of people overreacting sometimes and adding to the lack of clarity, and that plays into these malicious people's hands. But unfortunately, you kind of just have to accept that will happen. But that doesn't mean that the whole idea of recognizing it is pointless, or you mainstream or normalize the instances where Nazis are actually doing it so that they seem just like everyone else. But anyway, let's get to the actual video. So one of my big issues was that he overemphasizes the idea that this is all just trolling, and that if you pay attention to any of this, then you're playing into the hands of the trolls or the white nationalists.
And this time there was solid proof that it was a troll operation.
Photo shows President Trump posing with White House interns. At the president's request, all the young men and women give his thumbs up signature. But look at the intern in the back row. He's making a hand gesture that's quite different than any of the others. To some, it appears to symbolize white power. The white power signal is made with the right hand and outstretched fingers that make a W and P as in white power.
Hold on, we're not seriously falling for this, are we?
So for example here, he acknowledges that language is malleable and it can change over time, so like how the swastika changed its meaning. But he skims over it and says that, oh, it was different in that case because of some flimsy reason.
I keep saying the argument that, well, the swastika was taken by the Nazis, so symbols do change meaning, like it used to mean the sun or whatever. The validity of its changed meaning is pointed towards white supremacists now actually using it. But of course they're gonna use it. Unlike other hate symbols, this was given to them.
How was it given to them? What does that even mean? Like, I don't think language works like that. Like, you don't hand over symbols and language to other people. They're not tangible objects. So a bunch of white supremacists and some trolls as well thought it would be funny to spread the idea that the OK sign is now a symbol of white power to own the libs or whatever, right? But in doing so, they also used it in at least a not insignificant number of cases to signal white superiority. You know, I don't think people like this guy, for example, the type of guy PewDiePie weirdly fails to mention, was just trolling. I think once you actually buy into the tenets of white superiority and, you know, murder people, you can't just be considered the epic troll anymore. Like, remember this shit, Pewds? So it was co-opted and not just given, right? And of course, like, words and symbols can have multiple meanings, depending on the situation. There's no inherent meaning to anything other than how they're used in society. So yeah, if he says we gave it to them because it originally started as like a troll or something, maybe it did start out that way, that could be true. But then when you have people like this doing it unironically, or at this point the irony is so laced and blurred that it's virtually indistinguishable, then that is also what it starts to mean. The OK sign does represent white power in some very specific occasions, but it doesn't always have to. Sometimes it's just an OK sign. I think being aware of that is a pretty okay thing. Basically, I just think he overemphasized the hysteria around these things, which is an element that exists for sure, an element that is ultimately negative and harmful, and I think he overemphasized that without adequately recognizing the other side of it, which is that, yeah, white supremacists do use these symbols, and it is important to be cognizant of that. You know, because of some of those overreactions that PewDiePie has really highlighted and leaned into in this video, I think he encourages a situation where a lot of people don't see any scenario in which these could be used maliciously, right? I feel like how the average viewer would come away thinking about this stuff after his video is that any sort of reaction to these things are an overreaction. Just look at some of the comments that were upvoted. Let's be honest, everything is a hate symbol now. White male breathes the left. Is that like a personal attack or something? You know, just 280 upvotes there on a PewDiePie channel. Nice one. People just block their minds off when it is even suggested that someone might be signaling something. And I think he could have addressed that to some of his edgier and young impressionable fans to have like a more nuanced take on this. Okay, let me reiterate that it was really weird to me that he didn't once mention the Christchurch shooter and all of this. You know, the guy who literally used PewDiePie's name. I don't know, maybe that's like too painful for him to mention or something and I'm being an insensitive dick here. But then don't make a video about this topic, dog. I mean, it seems like a really relevant sticking point to just gloss over. And also this example that he used, he's like, whoa, people are falling for this. Stupid libtards. This is not very obvious at all whether or not the person is signaling something. And he's like, yeah, imagine reacting to that. Logically, it's clear nothing is being signaled, right? I mean, when you look at this photo, it's with White House officials, including Trump. Everyone is very clearly giving a thumbs up with a smile. And this one person is doing this other very specific sign in a strange moment with literally no expression. Everyone else is smiling. And given all the links to racism and white supremacy associated with Trump and the people he has hired, I think it's understandable to be suspicious. And I don't think it's fair to completely blow this off as people overreacting. Does it feel a bit cringe to hear people whining about something like this? Sure, yeah, even I get that a little bit. But it's not unreasonable whatsoever, I think. Like, you should be concerned if there's people that might be white supremacists in the White House. Okay, now having said all that, it would have been nice if in the video he didn't surreptitiously use something that is actually an emergent, pretty niche dog whistle. Maybe surreptitious is the wrong word because I don't know if it was intentional or not, but here's what it was. Okay, this right here, this is what is known as a groiper. Okay, so this became like really big in the last couple of months, I would say, last 2-3 months. And a lot of that is due to Nick Fuentes. Like literally the name of the frog, whatever this thing is, has been used to describe the fans of Nick Fuentes, who is, you know, a Nazi.
Her in your daily like existence by Jews.
I told you yes, absolutely. You laugh at it like...
How so? Can you...
Would you say that me having sex with my dog is the same thing as me having sex with a black man?
No. But they would both be degenerate.
Oh!
No, I think declaring like this is just representative of people that troll is a little disingenuous. Again, it's completely possible that this is just a coincidence. Like this on its own wouldn't like trigger much in me. But oh man, you add this on to that list and it starts getting weird, dog. And this isn't like the okay sign or even like your average Pepe where there's a lot of room for benefit of the doubt. This is like way more specific. And to do it in a video where you overemphasize a certain aspect of dog whistles and you downplay another aspect of it, we sarcastically title it "The Brofist is a hate symbol," to again play into that hysteria narrative, I'm sure a lot of people on poll would be very happy to know that Pewd still seems like he's based. Wink wink. Alright, let's move on. Let's get back to that list. Oh, there's also like a lot of pretty weird red pill-y kind of comments that he has made in different videos. There's even compilations of these that I've found. Maybe I'll show a couple of examples.
A multi-ethnic, multicultural society. That's pretty cool.
But why is the country, Felix, such a crime-ridden dystopia, enslaved by corporations? Wow, what a weird coincidence.
Hey, you racist piece of shit! How dare you! God, I'm sorry about Hector.
I mean, that's a pretty impressive list to have in, what, 2.5, 3 years max? You know, even if a few of these you might think I'm stretching a little bit to count that as an oopsie, or you know, it doesn't really quite meet your mark. I think when you put it all together, it makes for a pretty funny picture, right? You don't see Jacksepticeye or Markiplier, you know, similar types of content people, or at least they used to be, you know, having this. Even someone like way edgier, or someone who is thought of as being way edgier, like Filthy Frank. And he's actually explicitly playing a character who's supposed to be horrible. And yet he somehow, I don't think, comes close to that in terms of actual Nazi shit. Now again, like any one of these incidents on its own wouldn't really mean much to me, but all together, yeah, it's kind of weird. Now the question is whether or not that comes from an insidious place, as in he somewhat knows what he's doing and he knows that he holds beliefs that others view as repugnant or bigoted, so he just kind of slips them in here and there. But he's doing all of this as some sort of ploy to move people toward far-right ideology or something, or is he just like a stupid internet memer who gets a little bit too involved and buys into a little bit too much of the memey parts and the edgy humor and kind of gets swept up in all of that? Basically, do I think he's a Nazi or not? And no, I don't think he is. I think he's just a dumbass. Now, given everything I just did and everything I just said, you might be surprised by that. Basically, I just think that he's someone who is very much involved with internet and meme culture, and he doesn't really introspect or think too much about, or maybe he's incapable of thinking far enough about the things that come out through his videos. Even something like having Ben on his channel, Ben Shapiro that is, which I thought was really irresponsible. But from PewDiePie's point of view, it may not even be a political thing. Ben is like a meme character online. You know, facts don't care about your feelings, get wrecked, libtard, destroyed, all that stuff. Those have been pretty memeified the last couple of years. I think what is possible is that he has held some vaguely alt-rightish views in the past especially, and he's certainly at the very least like an anti-SJW kind of guy, but then so am I to some extent as well. But I think he goes further than just holding, you know, normie, anti-SJW sort of stances. I think the biggest evidence to support that would be the people he was following. I think that becomes pretty hard to argue against, and the fact that he was pretty clearly like a person who regularly visits Pole, and you're inevitably going to adopt some of that kind of humor, and some of that is going to come through in your videos, and maybe even some of those views, without you yourself explicitly being like a super racist person or maliciously or insidiously trying to red pill people. I think his staunchest supporters should be able to see that throughout all this, if you end up with a list like this, you aren't completely innocent, okay? That should be pretty undeniable. But that doesn't mean he's trying to recreate Hitler Youth here or anything. Basically, I just feel like if you once held views that were vaguely alt-right-ish, I don't think that necessarily makes you a straight-up alt-righter or a Nazi or a racist. I think the distinction is important enough to point out. You know, it's similar to, you know, there are some people who will vote for and advocate for racist policies and politicians without actually being racist themselves. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is I think there is a difference between ignorance and pure maliciousness, even though it can get really hard to disentangle the two at times.
That's not stupidity, that's fraud.
Tell me the difference between stupid and illegal and I'll have my wife's brother arrested. That was fine. There's some shady shit going down, but trust me, it's fueled by stupidity.
Now, you might say, why do I care? This distinction should be completely irrelevant and pointless. If you are contributing to something negative, like racism, then you are in effect a racist. But I don't think that's true. I think if you really want someone's behavior to change, then it's important to understand where they're coming from. And I think a lot of people miss the fact that it can be pretty easy for someone who is completely engulfed in these online circles and involve themselves a lot in these sort of meme internet culture, that you're going to end up saying and doing things that are problematic or will contribute to negative aspects of society. Also, I get the sense that people think because he's successful and he has a lot of subscribers that he should know better, and that he's actually hiding how clever he is or something like that to do this malicious stuff. You know, hiding his power levels, as they say. But I really don't think that's the case either. Sometimes stupid people get thrown success for some reason, and that may not make them any less stupid. Anyway, these are sort of my vague thoughts on the matter and on PewDiePie in general. And I could be completely wrong. I obviously don't know the guy personally. I'm just making what I consider to be the most reasonable conclusion about his character, what I think is most likely to be the case. And I really just don't see him as being the super malicious, evil racist guy. I mean, this is a guy who cried at the end of the Walking Dead game when Lee dies.
Oh, fuck that.
Now, theoretically, I shouldn't care whatsoever about what PewDiePie personally believes. Like, the only reason I care about PewDiePie's case is that I think his content does negative things and pulls some of his impressionable viewers further into a negative pathway, let's say. Whereas, you know, someone like JonTron, who came and made an ass of himself and showed that he probably held some pretty racist beliefs, I really didn't care about that, because none of that really ever manifests in his content as far as I know. If JonTron is 10 times more racist today than he was back then, it doesn't bother me. Alright, this was a more casual kind of video. I'll probably put more effort into the next one I make, which I have some ideas floating around. I was thinking about maybe doing something about Twitch, Twitch culture, Twitch fandom. There's a lot of interesting interaction there, I think. Or about gamer words. I've been thinking about that a lot recently as well, and my ideas on that have kind of evolved. Or maybe I was thinking about doing something about the streamer Trainwrecks, because, oh boy, if you know him, then you know. And I'm on summer holidays now, so hopefully I'll start pumping him out soon. Unfortunately, the first week of my holidays, I've basically just been procrastinating, and I've been rewatching Community, the Dan Harmon show, and it was actually better than I remembered. But yeah, I kind of binged on that instead of doing anything productive, but now that I've got that out of my system, hopefully I start doing some stuff. Yeah, like, subscribe, bell, whatever, see ya.